Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Daf Yomi shiur. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Tisha B'Av. We pick up in the middle of Siman Taf Kuf Nun Dalid on limud Aleph, Amud Aleph, the bottom line, with the Mechaber in Sif Vav. We'll be learning today, Mirza Hashem, most of Daf limud Aleph, Amud Beis, but we still have a decent amount of Mishnah Berurah to cover on limud Aleph, Amud Aleph. Now, I elected to end the previous shiur at Sif Vav because Sif Vav really encompasses the halachas of a person who is ill on Tisha B'Av, somebody who is suffering on Tisha B'Av, and a question of whether or not he should fast. I didn't want to start Sif Vav and break in the middle, so we begin today on the bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch, limud Aleph, Amud Aleph, with Sif Vav. Says the Mechaber, Chaya, a woman who has given birth, a yeledes, a kimpatur, chaya kol shloishim yom, during the first 30 days after her childbirth, v'chein chayla shehu tzarech lechol, and similarly a chayla, an ill individual who, I'm going to teach the words literally, an ill individual who needs to eat, shehu tzarech lechol. Now we're going to have to see in the Mishnah Berurah what kind of ill individual are we speaking about here. But in any case, the Mechaber so far has given us two different people. The Mechaber is giving us the Chaya Kol Shloshim Yom, the Yeledes, the woman who has given birth, who is still within the first 30 days after her childbirth, and a Chayla, an ill individual, Shehu Tzarech Lechel, who needs to eat. These people, says the Mechaber, Ein Tzrichin Aimed, they don't need an evaluation. Nobody has to evaluate them to see, do they really need to eat? Is there going to be a sakana? Is there going to be a danger? If they don't eat, they don't need an evaluation. Ella, rather, rather, without any evaluation, if it's a woman who's within the first 30 days after childbirth, or this chayla, this ill individual who needs to eat, you give them food to eat immediately. And the Mechaber says the reason for this is to b'mekayim chayli like gazer rabbanon. This is a rule that we have all over Shas, which is that when it comes to a din d'Rabbanon, the Chachamim did not enact their decrees and their restrictions on a chayla, on an ill individual. And when it comes to the fast of Tisha B'Av, we treat the fast of Tisha B'Av very much as a davar chamur. It's very strict, but it's a d'Rabbanon, it's not a d'Oraisa. And b'mekayim chayli like other Rabbanon, the Chachamim did not enact their decrees on sick individuals. Now let's turn back to limud Aleph, Amud Aleph. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, and let's try to get a sense for what type of person are we speaking about here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and test. Chaya kol shloishim yom, a woman who is within the first 30 days after childbirth. Says the Chavetz Chaim, de mistama amrinon shehi chalusha. The default position when we're dealing with a woman within the first 30 days after childbirth is shehi chalusha, that she is naturally in a weakened state. V'havya kechayla she'ein by sakana. And therefore, she is considered a chayla she'ein by sakana. She is considered an ill individual who's not in any danger. So here we have very clear from the Chavetz Chaim, the first person mentioned by the Mechaber, this woman who's within the first 30 days after childbirth, the Chavetz Chaim says, that is a chayla she'ein by sakana. It's an ill individual who's not in any danger. And what's the halacha, said the Mechaber? The Mechaber said they don't need any evaluation. Rather, machilan oisai miyad. You give them to eat right away. Val Kain, continues the Chavetz Chaim, after le'inyan Yom HaKippurim hi la'achar shiva kishar kol adam, even though when it comes to the halachas of Yom Kippur, over there we say that once a woman passes the first 7 days after childbirth, she's equal to anybody else, and she must fast on Tisha B'Av unless her life is in danger. That's the halacha that we say in Hilchos Yom Kippurim in Siman Taf Reish Yud Zayin. Kan, but over here in Tisha B'Av, over here when we're discussing the halachas of Tisha B'Av, not Yom Kippur, Shehu D'Rabbanan, Tisha B'Av is a din D'Rabbanan, not a din D'Oraisa, like Gazru B'Mkaim Chayli. The Chazal did not enact their decrees they don't apply to an ill individual. And this Kippur, this woman who is within the first 30 days after childbirth, she's an ill individual. She's considered to be a chayla she'ein by sakana. Okay. So far what we've established over here, according to the Chavetz Chaim, is that the Mechaber is telling us a chayla she'ein by sakana, and he's using the example of this woman who's within the first 30 days after childbirth. A chayla she'ein by sakana is not required to fast, essentially. She doesn't need any evaluation. She doesn't need anything. You give her to eat right away because b'mkaim chayli legazer rabbanan. Now on that halacha, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'ayin b'taz u'b'shari achroinim, the Taz as well as other achroinim, and in the Sha'ar Tzion, he brings this down from the Gra, the Ma'amar Mordechai, the Nahar Shalom. He says here, da'afilu vadai ein ba, even if there is certainly no sakana, this woman is not in any danger at all. And so too with the second case of the Mechaber, the one that the Mechaber says is the chayla shu tzarich lechol, the ill individual who needs to eat, but even if he is not in any danger whatsoever. And even if they don't say, I really feel like I have to eat. No, they're not saying that. Mutter b'Tisha B'Av, a chayla she'ein by sakana is allowed to eat. It doesn't even have to be that they come into the kitchen and they say, I really feel like I need to eat. No. If it's a chayla, he's a sick person, even a chayla she'ein by sakana, doesn't matter. He could go ahead and he could eat. And so to the kimpatur. She could go ahead and she could eat. Even if they're not saying, I really feel like I need to eat. That's the Taz and other achronim. And even though the Marshal argues on this halacha of the Shulchan Aruch, V'daita, in his opinion, is the le'inyan zeh shava Tisha B'Av liyom kippurim. The Marshal seems to say that in the case of the Kippur, har halacha is equal to the halacha on Yom Kippur. Da'afilu amra tzricha ani lechel. If it's a woman who's after 7 days, but within the first 30 after childbirth, even if she says, I feel like I need to eat, keven shehu lacha shiva chayeves lehisanois, the Marshal says once 7 days have passed, she's required to fast. Unless she's presenting as being somewhat ill. Many achroinim agree that me'ikar adin, she's allowed to go eat. Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, Kvar Nahagu, we already have the established custom, Lehisanois, that they do fast. Like the Ramah is going to say shortly in this sif, Baruch Hashem, I think most women nowadays, if it's already, let's say, 20 days after she gave birth, and she doesn't appear to be ill, and she seems to have already healed from the childbirth, and she's not presenting as being significantly weakened or anything else. So we follow the minig of the Ramah, which is that the default position would be that she should fast. But if you could tell that she still really hasn't healed from the childbirth, or she's presenting as being somewhat ill, or if she's a woman that has a weak constitution by nature, then within the first 30 days she should not fast. Now let's say a perfectly healthy yoledes within the first 30 days, shemisana, she starts fasting, and then in the middle of the day, somehow she feels an extra weakness, she feels an atypical level of weakness, yesh lifsaik, it is proper to paskin, shaloi tisane, b'she'eris hayom, she should break her fast, and she should not continue fasting. Now let's see Sif Yud, Ois Cotton Yud in the Mishnah Berurah. The second case of the Mechaber was this case that the Mechaber said, Chayla shehu tzarech lechel, an ill individual who needs to eat. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cotton Yud Chayla, he brings an interesting case. Chasar deya, somebody who seems to be a little mentally off. Shenisrape miyoim liyoim, And I'm not sure if this means that as the days go by, he's improving, or it means that he's very day by day, one day this way, one day that way. Says the Chavetz Chaim, muter b'basa v'yayin kol yemei hashavua. He's allowed to eat meat, he's allowed to drink wine during the whole shiur shechal of Tisha B'Av, v'lo yisana b'Tisha B'Av, and he should not fast on Tisha B'Av. Now, ois kat yud aleph, this chayla shehu tzarech lechol. What does this mean? When the Mechaber says a chayla, an ill individual, shehu tzarech lechol, who needs to eat, what does that mean? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, Ritzaynei Loymar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, shehu chalush, we're talking about somebody who is weak, v'chash begufay, he doesn't feel well. Literally, the words v'chash begufay means he's pained in his guf. He's pained in his body. So in English, what this means is, Ritzaynei Loymar shehu chalush, we have a chayla over here, we have somebody who's ill, and he's weak, he doesn't feel well. Even though he's not presenting as being in any kind of acute danger, you're allowed to eat. You go ahead and you feed him. He doesn't need any kind of evaluation. Chavetz Chaim points out that the proper text over here is the way we have it. It's a lashon rabim. They, both the Yoledes Shloishim and the Chayla She'ein Bei Sakana, both of them, Ein Tzrichin Oimed, they don't need an evaluation. It goes on both cases of the Mechaber. V'chein Issa B'Torah Adam U'Baran, that's the text that appears in the Torah Adam and the Ran. V'Kavana, and the Kavana of the Mechaber is, Deit Tzarich Le'emoid, you don't have to evaluate, U'L'sha'er, and to assess, Im Tavai L'Dei Sakana, if these individuals may come to danger, Al Yidei Zeh Shetisane, through their fasting. Ta'afilu Im Basakana, because even if they're in no danger whatsoever, Kevan Shehi Bechlal Chayla, since this Yoledes is considered a Chayla, and the other one, the Chayla Shu Tzarech Lechel, this person who's sick is a Chayla, Eina Tzricha Lehisanois, they don't need to fast. So it's coming out very clearly over here from the Mechaber and from the way the Mishnah Berurah is mefarish the Mechaber, is that the Mechaber over here in Siv Vav is saying very clearly, a chayla she'ein bei sakana is not required to fast on Tisha B'Av. And the reason is because b'mkaim chayli legazer rabbanan. The Chazal did not enact their decrees on ill individuals, and this person and this Yoledes, they are ill. And since they're ill, they're not required to fast. Vayin b'lekutei prichada shekasav, Ritzaynei Loymar demistama machilin oisa. The Lekutei Prichada says that this Mechaber is telling you a little bit different. He's telling you demistama machilin oisa. The default position is that you give them food to eat and they don't have to fast. If the Yoledes herself says, look, I feel absolutely fine, there's absolutely no reason why I can't fast. I feel 100% perfectly normal. She sees herself as being completely healthy and she doesn't feel weak at all. The Prichadash is machmir and says that she should fast. Okay, so here we have the shita of the Mechaber, and to sum it up, the shita of the Mechaber is chayla she'ein bei sakana, somebody who's ill, even though he's not in any danger whatsoever. And the Mechaber says that a Yoledes Shloishim, a woman within the first 30 days of when she's given birth, is considered a chayla she'ein bei sakana. These people are not mechuyev to fast. Because the Chazal did not enact their decrees on people who are ill. That's the Mechaber. Now let's go to the top line here of Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. Let's see the words of the Ramah. Haga umiyu, however, says the Ramah, noyagin lihis anois, we are accustomed, our minig is that these individuals do fast, kolzman she'ein lehem tsar gadol, as long as they're not significantly suffering, shahaya lachaish lisakana, where it would make sense to have a concern for sakana. Literally, to translate these words, kolzman she'ein tsar gadol, as long as they're not suffering significantly, shahaya lachaish lisakana, so that there is a concern for sakana. V'hameka lo hifsid, however, somebody who is lenient will not lose out. And if you paskin leniently and you say that they don't have to fast even if they're not B'tzar Gadol, then it's okay. Lo hifsid. Now, I struggle with this Ramah from a simple reading of the Ramah, where the Ramah says, She'ein lehem tzar gadol shehayalachush l'sakana. What is the Ramah saying? You would be tempted from a simple reading of the Ramah to say that the Ramah argues on the Mechaber. And the Mechaber says, Chayla she'ein by sakana doesn't have to fast. Says the Ramah, our minig is that you do fast unless you're a Chayla she'yesh by sakana. She'ein lehem tzar gadol shehayalachush l'sakana. But from the Mishnah Berurah, it doesn't sound that way. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Yud Gimel. Umihu, however, Noihagin Lehisanois, the minig is that these individuals do fast. Says the Chavetz Chaim, and in this ice cotton, he's directly addressing the Yoledes, the woman who is within the first 30 days after childbirth. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Hainu afilu amra tzricha ani lechel. Says the Chavetz Chaim that according to the Ramah, where the Ramah says that the minig is that they do fast unless they have tsar gadol, unless they're really suffering, shahayalachush l'sakana, he means even if the Yoledes says, look, I feel like I need to eat. The dafka achar shiva, but this is only once she passed 7 days after childbirth. Aval toy shiva, within the first 7 days after childbirth, afilu amra eini tzricha, even if she'll say, I don't need to eat, ein la lehisanois, she should not fast. First 7 days with the childbirth, no fasting. Certainly within the first 3 days after childbirth, it is forbidden for her to fast. Now, Ois Katan Yodalit, the words of the Ramah were, Kol zman she'ein lehem tsar gadol, as long as they're not significantly suffering. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'hu hadin, the same halacha applies, im hi ktsas chayla, if she presents as being somewhat sick. The chanal b'sif katan tes, va'afilu loy amra tzrichani. Now, over here, the Ramah is addressing the Yoledes. Now again, the words of the Ramah were, in the case, let's say, of the Yoledes Toshloshim, the Ramah said, our minig is that she does fast unless she's b'tzar gadol, unless she's significantly suffering, shehayalachush l'sakana. On that, the Chavetz Chaim says, he equates what the Ramah says, if they have tsar gadol and hayalachush l'sakana, he equates that with v'hu hadin im hiktsas chayla. Also, if she presents as being somewhat ill, that's the equal of her being b'tzar gadol shahayalachush l'sakana. Now, earlier on Amud Aleph at Siftes, the words of the Chavetz Chaim were, yeah, he said over here, Achein kfar noagu lehisanois k'moishe kasav haRamah. We are accustomed to following the opinion of the Ramah, and the Yoledes fasts, kol zman she'ein lehem chulsha, as long as they're not excessively weak, v'nisrapu mileidasan, and they've already healed. Avalim adayin loy nisrapu legamri, but if they have not yet completely healed, oy shehi ktsas chayla, or they are presenting as being somewhat ill, aykalusha betiva, or by nature she's a weak individual, loy tisane b'say shloshim, then she should not fast within the first 30 days. Over here in Ois Katan Tes on Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, the Chavetz Chaim is telling you the shita of the Ramah. So the Chavetz Chaim is telling you over here that when the Ramah says that our minig is that the Yoledes does not fast unless she's b'tzar gadol shahayalachush l'sakana, that also means that she should not fast if she is somewhat ill. That's what he says here. If she's ktsas chayla, if she's somewhat ill, oichalusha betiva, or by nature she's naturally weak. Now over there, the Chavetz Chaim doesn't say a word about sakana, so it does not seem that the Chavetz Chaim is understanding the Ramah as saying that somebody has to be a chayla sheyesh by sakana in order not to fast. He's saying that the woman within the first 30 days of childbirth, if she's presenting as being somewhat ill, or by nature she's a weak person, she doesn't have to fast. Now, does that mean that he's saying that that woman is by default a chayla sheyesh by sakana? Doesn't say that. Okay. Now let's continue in the Mishnah Berurah here on your cutting your dalit. So v'hu adinim iktas chayla v'chanal b'sif cutting tes. V'afilu lo yomer tzvichani. Even if she's not saying I need to eat. V'ayin b'magen Avram shekasav. Da'afilu b'makom shenoi hagin lahachmir. Even in regions where they have this minig to be machmir, but Tisha B'Av shenidche, if the fast is on Sunday, when really Tisha B'Av fell out on Shabbos, so the fast is a nidche, yesh lahakal shaloi tesane, we could certainly be makel not to fast. V'ayin be'el yerav shekasav, da'afilu yeledes she'ena mesane, even somebody like a yeledes who's not going to fast, tesane eze shoyi, she should fast a little. If even that is too difficult for her, loy tesana klal. Now let's go to Mishnah Berurah is cutting tesvav shayalachish l'sakana u'boifen zeh also la lehisanis. If a person is mamish in sakana, then it's forbidden for them to fast. Is cutting tezayin v'hameka loy hifsid. Somebody who rules leniently will not lose out. Umikoshkein ba'adam chalosh. Certainly, if a person who by nature is weak, v'hu chayla she'ein boi sakana, and he's a chayla she'ein boi sakana, ein kedai lahachmir. It's not kedai to be machmir, even by a chayla she'ein boi sakana, especially if it's a person who's weak. So I'm left with a little bit of a puzzle over here, which is, when I say a puzzle, I don't mean so much a puzzle halacha l'maisa. My puzzle is I don't have a good grasp yet of how to understand the words of the Ramah. Again, if you look at the top line here on Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, the words of the Ramah are, we have the minute to fast, unless these people are significantly suffering, but the Chavetz Chaim is telling me that this does not mean that the Ramah is saying that in order not to fast, you'll have to be a chayla sheyesh by sakana. That's not what the Ramah means. The Ramah means that this person is not a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Maybe what he means is that there's different levels. There's a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Nowadays, chas v'chalil lo yaleinu, we shouldn't hear from it anymore. Somebody who's sitting. I heard from a good friend of mine, an older man, a chashav, a mashgiach in the yeshiva, and he told me that he had COVID-19 over Yom Kippur. So Baruch Hashem, he was well. He was feeling weak, and I think maybe he had a low-grade fever, but he was having absolutely no trouble breathing. He wasn't very ill. He wasn't feeling very sick. The way he put it to me, he was feeling weak and a little bit woozy, and he had maybe a low-grade fever. So the doctor told him that he could fast on Yom Kippur, but he should drink pachas mikashir. He should do pachas, drink an ounce at a time, however many minutes apart. He should do pachas. But the doctor told him, if your symptoms get even the slightest bit worse, if you get a fever over 100.5, or you have the slightest trouble breathing of any kind, you must break your fast. That's a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Somebody who has COVID right away, chayla sheyesh by sakana. But how about somebody who has, so to speak, your typical case of strep throat? Okay, a guy has or not even strep throat. A guy, sometimes you wake up in the morning, you have a bug. A guy has a headache and he feels a little bit run down and he takes his temperature. He has a slight fever. Okay, what are you going to call that? You could call that a chaylish, just stam, a chaylish ein by sakana. But then there are also varying degrees. You have an older adult, somebody who's 60. Somebody who's 60 says he's not feeling well and he presents with 103 fever. 103 fever for somebody who's 60 years old is very significant. That's very acute. Now, are you right away going to jump to call him a chaylish yesh by sakana? Maybe. But how about if he has 101.5? I don't know if you're going to jump to call him a chaylish yesh by sakana, but you might say that that's called tsar gadol shehayalachish l'sakana. There is room to be concerned for sakana. You hear the difference that I'm saying? One is a clear-cut case. One is the guy who has COVID-19. That's a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Then there's a less clear-cut case, which is if you have a 30-year-old who has strep and he's not feeling well and he has 101 fever, you're not going to say, oh, mom, she's a chayla sheyesh by sakana. No, but how about if he's 60 and he has 102? You're not going to jump right away and say chayla sheyesh by sakana, but you'll say he's a chayla shehaya lachush l'sakana. There's already room for a concern for sakana, so maybe that's how the Chavetz Chaim is understanding the Ramah here when the Ramah says shehaya lachush l'sakana. There's room to be chayshish. There's room to have concern. Halacha l'maisa. We have this sheet of the Mechaber, which is very, very clear cut, which is evil a chayla she'ein by sakana, and there's no shash sakana. Somebody's a chayla. He's sick. He's not feeling well. Somebody is sick. He's a chayla she'ein by sakana. He doesn't have to fast. He doesn't need any limud. Why? Because b'makom chayla like gazer rabbanan. Then we have the Ramah, who's a little bit more machmer, and the Ramah seems to be saying, according to the Chavetz Chaim over here, that unless the person is really suffering, and there's epis even a room for a concern for a sakana, he doesn't have to fast. Less than that, the Ramah seems to say, maybe lechatchila he should fast. V'hamekel lo yifsid. But if you're mekel, you're not going to lose out. So the contemporary paiskim, that's what they seem to say. The contemporary paiskim say, you have the Mechaber, who says, even a chayla she'ein by sakana, he's not mechuyev to fast. No, the Ramah says, be machmer. But the Ramah says, hamekel lo yifsid. So that's what you have to take into consideration. If somebody, chas v'chalila, is not feeling well on Tisha B'Av, somebody says, I don't feel well, should I fast? No, try to fast. It depends how you feel. You feel really, really rotten? No, I don't feel terrible. I'm just feeling off. All right, you feel like you can fast, try to fast. As somebody says, I can't. I can't. Or you see somebody's really suffering. Okay, don't fast. Hamekel lo yifsid. Okay, Siv Zayin. Rechitza asura b'Tisha B'Av, bathing, washing is forbidden on Tisha B'Av. Bein b'chamin, bein mitzainin, whether in hot water, whether in cold water. Afilu lahishit etzbay b'mayim aser, even to immerse your finger in water is for just for rechitza purposes is forbidden. You don't wash, you don't bathe for any reason. Well, we'll see about any reason on Tisha B'Av. But the stam position, the default position, is that rechitza is forbidden on Tisha B'Av. Now we get into the nitty gritty. Sivches tefillah shel mitzvah bismana muteres me'ikar adin, a tefillah shel mitzvah, a woman who's going to the mikveh, a woman who was a nida, now she's going to the mikveh to become tahar. So if it's bismana, if she's really going to the mikveh at the proper time, it's a real tefillah shel mitzvah, but we'll explain what that means in a minute, then muteres, then strictly speaking, even Tisha B'Av by night, she's allowed to go to the mikveh. Aval, however, says the Mechaber, bismana zeh, nowadays ain't tefillah bismana. We don't have the concept of tefillah bismana. Our women never go to the mikveh at the right time. And we'll explain that in a minute. Hilkach, therefore, says the Mechaber, loy titfol bay. Therefore, she cannot go to the mikveh on Tisha B'Av, v'chein nagu, and that is our custom. Says the Mishnah Berurah, and I was cutting your zayin. Aval bismana zeh, nowadays we don't have tefillah bismana. Why? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. What the Mechaber means to say is, Shenagu anoshim, our women are already accustomed for many generations, leishev al tipas dam shivanikim davka. Let's remember, midin daraisa, a woman sees dam, she's allowed to go to the mikveh 7 days later. That's only midaraisa, not midrabanan. Midaraisa, a woman sees dam, she goes to the mikveh 7 days later. She doesn't need shiva nikiyim. She doesn't need all these bedikas. She doesn't need shiva nikiyim. She sees dam 7 days later. If she's not seeing dam, she could go to the mikveh. That's it. Din daraisa. That would be what's called tefillah bismana. But we don't have tefillah bismana because we're makbid together with other hakpadas. We're makbid on shiva nikiyim. We treat her like a zava. So she needs shiva nikiyim. She needs 7 clean days before she can go to the mikveh. So by the time she goes to the mikveh, that's not tefillah bismana anymore. If it's not tefillah bismana, she can't do it on Tisha B'Av. Memela einat tefillah bezmana. V'lama titfel. So why should she go to the mikvah on Tisha B'Av? The harei mitzvahs aina lo yuchel akayim b'Tisha B'Av. She can't be together with her husband on Tisha B'Av anyway, because marital relations are forbidden on Tisha B'Av. So why go to the mikvah? It's not tefillah bezmana. You can't be mekayim aina, so why are you going to the mikvah? Wait till after Tisha B'Av. Therefore, you don't go to the mikvah on Tisha B'Av. Ella, what should she do, says the Mishnah Berurah? Terchaitz, if a woman is really supposed to go to the mikvah Tisha B'Av by night, Terchaitz v'tachayif erev Tisha B'Av, she should wash and bathe and do her chafifa, do her mikvah preparations on erev Tisha B'Av, or l'maitzai Tisha B'Av, and then after Tisha B'Av, chefefes ma'at kod b'tfilah, she does an abbreviated chafifa right before she goes to the mikvah. Why is she doing that? To be inon samach l'chafifa tfilah, because the chafifa has to come right before the tfilah. When it comes to the question of wearing clean white begadim on Tisha B'Av, if a woman is in the middle of Shiva Nekiyim, Ayin La'el B'Siv Tafkaf Nun Aleph Siv Gimel B'Haga of a Mishnah Berurah Sham, where we said over there that it said over there that Me'ikar Adin, she shouldn't wear freshly laundered lavanim on Shiva Nekiyim. Instead, she should wear a Chaluk Baduk V'Yafeh, something that she knows is clean, so she'll be able to see if she has a kesem. This is a machlokes in the contemporary paiskim. When exactly do you do the chafifa? Do you do it on Erev Tisha B'Av, or do you do it on Motzei Tisha B'Av? It's the same machlokes that exists on Erev Shabbos, which we spoke about previously. Is the ikar chafifa the chafifa that takes place during the day? So you do it on Erev Shabbos, or is the ikar chafifa the chafifa that takes place at night? So you do it on Motzei Shabbos, and each person will follow his Pesach, the Rav that he asks his shilos to. We're going to stop over here with Siftes. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. Mishenichtas Adar Marbin B'Simcha. The Rabban Shem should bring us into a time of Simcha. We shouldn't hear any more Besurais Reis. We should only hear Besurais Tovais. Meretz Hashem, it should be Mishenichtas Adar Marbin B'Simcha V'Kolshke Nisan. You know, it's like everybody's looking at those charts, those first wave, second wave, those horrible charts. We should see now the Simcha. We should see the Simcha going up and up and up and up and up. We should come to Purim b'tach Simcha G'dayla, that we should come to Pesach with even a greater Simcha, and that we should come to Shavuos, to Zman Kabbalas HaTorah with even a greater Simcha, and Mirz Hashem, we should come to Yom Noraim with even a greater Simcha. And thank you again for joining me for limud HaTorah. Be well.